Imagine this. You're the most powerful man in the world. You've got armies, palaces, gold, and an empire that stretches across continents. But then, the one person you're obsessed with, your wife, your empress, dies suddenly. Most men mourn, they grieve, they move on, but not Nero. The Roman emperor who burned through fortune, through rivals, through entire cities, wasn't going to let death stop him. Instead, he found a young boy who looked eerily like his dead wife. And in one of history's darkest acts, Nero ordered him to be castrated, dressed in the empress's robes, and forced him to live as his new wife. Tonight, we uncover the disturbing story of Sporus, the boy who was mutilated to replace an empress. A tale of obsession, madness, and power gone unchecked, one that still shocks the world nearly 2,000 years later. This is the twisted love story of Emperor Nero, Nero Claudius Caesar Augustus Germanicus. Even his name sounds heavy, like something carved into marble built to last for centuries. But behind the grandeur, Nero was one of Rome's most controversial emperors. Born in the year 37 AD, Nero was not destined for the throne. His rise came through a web of family plots and political marriages. His mother, Agrippina the Younger, was ruthless, and she made sure her son climbed higher than anyone expected. She married the Emperor Claudius, convinced him to adopt Nero, and when Claudius mysteriously died, Nero, at just 17 years old, suddenly became Emperor of Rome. At first, many thought Nero would be a golden boy. Young, handsome, well-educated, he had the philosopher Seneca as his tutor. Rome was optimistic. Maybe this teenager would be a fresh start. But almost immediately, cracks began to show. Nero didn't want to rule like a statesman. He wanted to be an artist, a performer, a god on stage. He sang, played the lyre, even competed in chariot races. Imagine the most powerful man on earth begging crowds to applaud his acting. For Romans, it was humiliating. For Nero, it was everything. Yet behind the performances was a darker side. Paranoia ran deep. Anyone who threatened him, or who he thought might threaten him, was eliminated. Even his own mother, Agrippina, the woman who put him on the throne, wasn't safe. When she became too controlling, Nero had her killed. Historians paint him as cruel, reckless, and obsessed with himself. He spent fortunes on parties, palaces, and shows. He bankrupted the empire while ordinary citizens struggled. And then came the Great Fire of Rome in 64 AD. Flames tore through the city for days. Thousands were left homeless. Rumors spread that Nero himself ordered it, that he wanted to clear land for his grand new palace. Did he really fiddle while Rome burned? Ancient sources disagree, but the legend stuck, and for the people of Rome, Nero became a symbol of decadence and destruction. But perhaps the most disturbing thing about Nero wasn't the murders, or the fire, or even the executions. It was his obsession with beauty, with appearances, with creating his own reality, no matter how twisted it had to be. And that obsession would only grow stronger when he met the woman who would change everything, Poppaea Sabina. Poppaea Sabina. Her name still drips with scandal nearly 2,000 years later. She was born into wealth, raised in luxury, and trained from the very beginning to use beauty as power. Ancient writers described her as one of the most stunning women in Rome. But she wasn't just beautiful. She was ambitious, calculating, the kind of woman who knew exactly how to bend the empire's most powerful men to her will. Before Nero, she was married twice, first to a Roman nobleman, then to Otho, a man who would later become emperor himself. But Poppaea had her eyes set on something far greater. She wanted the throne, and the fastest way to get it was through Nero. At the time, Nero was married to his first wife, Octavia, the daughter of the previous emperor Claudius. Octavia was noble, quiet, proper, the perfect political wife. But Poppaea was fire. She whispered to Nero, flattered him, fed his ego. She told him he deserved more, that he deserved her, and slowly she convinced him to get rid of Octavia. Octavia was divorced, accused of adultery, and eventually executed. With her gone, Poppaea became empress. She had achieved what she wanted, the throne of Rome by the side of the most powerful man in the world. For a time, it seemed like Poppaea had everything. Nero adored her. He showered her with gifts, with titles, with attention. She wasn't just his wife, she was his obsession. But then came the moment that changed everything. In the year 65 AD, Poppaea was pregnant with Nero's child, and according to several ancient sources, one night the emperor flew into a rage. The reasons are debated. Some say it was jealousy, others say it was something as small as an argument over the way he returned from the races. Whatever the cause, Nero lashed out. He struck Poppaea. Some accounts claim he kicked her in the stomach. She died soon after, along with the unborn child. For Rome, it was another scandal. For Nero, it was a wound that never healed. He mourned her. He praised her as a goddess. He refused to let go of her memory. But Nero was not the kind of man who accepted loss. If death had taken Poppaea from him, he would find a way to bring her back, and that's when his obsession took a horrifying turn, when he found a boy named Sporus. Not long after Poppaea's death, Nero saw someone who stopped him cold, a young boy, delicate, beautiful, and eerily similar to his dead wife. His name was Sporus. For most emperors, the resemblance would have been a passing curiosity, but Nero wasn't most emperors. He saw Poppaea in that boy, and he decided to make her live again. So Nero ordered the boy to be castrated, a brutal operation meant to erase his manhood and reshape him into something closer to the woman Nero had lost. The boy was given a new name, Sporus, meaning seedless, a cruel reminder of what he had been forced to lose. But Nero didn't stop there. He staged a wedding. Rome's most powerful man married this boy in a full ceremony. Sporus was dressed in Poppaea's gowns, veiled like a bride, paraded through the palace as the new empress. And in public, Nero called him Lady, even Poppaea. He forced the empire to treat Sporus not as a victim, but as Rome's new queen. It wasn't love, it wasn't grief, it was madness, and everyone in Rome knew it. From that day forward, Sporus lived not as himself, but as Poppaea's shadow. He wore the empress's jewels, the silks, the perfumes. He walked beside Nero in public, veiled like a Roman bride. To the crowds, he was introduced as the new Lady of the Empire. And Nero didn't hide it. He paraded Sporus openly, as if daring anyone to laugh or object. Senators whispered, soldiers sneered, but no one challenged the emperor. Behind palace walls, Sporus had no escape. Every gesture, every glance, every word was scripted to mimic the woman he had been forced to replace. He wasn't a partner. He was a living monument to Nero's obsession. To Rome, it was a spectacle. To Sporus, it was a prison. In 68 AD, Nero's empire collapsed. Surrounded by enemies, abandoned by allies, the emperor took his own life. For Rome, it was the end of a tyrant. For Sporus, it was the end of one nightmare and the beginning of another. With Nero gone, Sporus was passed from man to man like a trophy, first to Otho, Nero's friend, and ironically, Poppaea's former husband, then to Vitellius, the new emperor. But Vitellius had something far more cruel in mind. He planned to throw Sporus into the arena, dressed as a maiden, and have him publicly violated in front of thousands, a grotesque spectacle of humiliation. Faced with that fate, Sporus made the only choice he could. He killed himself. A boy who once looked too much like an empress died because Rome would never let him be anything else. The story of Sporus isn't just a bizarre footnote in Roman history, it's a window into the dangers of absolute power. For Nero, grief twisted into obsession. He couldn't bring Poppaea back from the dead, so he tried to rewrite reality. He forced an innocent boy to live as his wife, and in doing so, turned personal madness into public theatre. For Rome, it was one more scandal in a long list of Nero's excesses. To the senators, it was proof of his decadence. To the people, it was another reason to despise him. And to historians, it became one of the clearest examples of how far a man, and an empire, could fall. Sporus himself left nothing behind. No words, no writings, no monument, only the fragments of his story told by others. His life was consumed by Nero's shadow, and his death was a final act of defiance against humiliation. 2,000 years later, we remember Nero as a mad emperor, a ruler who killed his mother, burned his city, and turned a boy into a bride. But behind that legend lies the human tragedy of Sporus, a young life destroyed by power, cruelty, and obsession. History remembers the emperors, but sometimes it's the forgotten victims, the ones who never had a choice, who tell us the most about the past.